Hey everybody, this video is part of a series of in-depth looks at different punk rock lead guitar techniques. Today we're going to cover hammer-ons and pull-offs. But before we begin, remember to like and subscribe. That way you get notified when I post new content. I post new videos like this several times a week. And here we go. Alright, so hammer-ons and pull-offs are not just used in punk rock lead guitar. They're used in practically every lead guitar application. And so a hammer-on is basically changing the pitch of the note like this. And the pull-off is kind of like the hammer-on's opposite. So instead of hammering on, we're going to pull off. And while these are both somewhat basic techniques, there are some nuances to them that you need to know in order to get them right. And so starting with hammer-ons, a hammer-on can be done anywhere up and down the fretboard. It can be a 1-fret interval, a 2-fret interval, or a 3-fret interval, or any interval that you can reach with your fingers. The most common hammer-on in rock and pretty much punk music is using your ring finger to go 2 frets up from your index finger. And we can go up and down the scale like the minor pentatonic. And to do this technique, what we want to first do is root our index finger, fret it like we would normally fret at the position of the first note that we want to play. And then we're going to use an additional finger to hammer on at the higher fret that we want to change the pitch to. And one of the things to remember with this technique is we want to do it with a decent amount of force. We should be able to hear the hammer-on whether we pick it or not. That's the amount of force we want to use. So in order to achieve this amount of force, we want to have our thumb kind of bridged around the back side of the neck like this, because we're going to use that force of our thumb to counteract the force of our hammer-on. And a common mistake that new guitar players make is they kind of flail their fingers and use these lower knuckles to kind of bend into the hammer-on like that. But what we want to do is we want to keep our fingers kind of curved in the position that we want them, and we want to use just this main knuckle where our finger meets our hand to do the motion. So you can see my finger is already curled in the position to where it's going to rest when it hits the fretboard. There's not a lot of movement with these other knuckles while we're doing that. So we want to practice with all of our fingers, using that big knuckle at the base of our finger to perform the hammer-on. And so using that big knuckle at the base of our finger as the main lever for our hammer-ons is going to create more force, so we're going to have clearer sounding hammer-ons. And it's also going to make us more accurate because our curled fingers are already going to be in position to hit where they need to be, instead of trying to kind of aim the finger by bending using those other knuckles as we're coming down. That's going to slow you down, and it's also going to make you less accurate. So a good exercise we can use to work on our hammer-ons outside of just playing songs that incorporate hammer-ons, which is probably the best way to do it, is to do an exercise like this. And so all we're doing is we're doing different interval hammer-ons up and down the neck. So we're going from index to middle, index to ring, index to pinky, index to ring, index to middle, and then start all over again. And we can just do that over and over again, and you can do it on the high E string or the B string, and work your way down the string so you can kind of get a feel for the different position and how much pressure you need to put on each different string. And so there's also other types of hammer-ons that you can do. They don't all have to be rooted with your index finger. You can do ones where you're doing your ring finger to your pinky, or your middle finger to your ring, or your middle finger to your pinky. The common denominator in most of these, though, is that your index finger is still going to be rooted when you do those hammer-ons, so you have support for the other fingers. But these tend to be a little bit more advanced techniques, so if you're ready for that, you can work on that with a similar exercise to the one I just showed you. But if it's beyond your ability right now, just know that that's another option. Okay, and so the opposite of a hammer-on is a pull-off. And so for a pull-off, we're going to change the pitch lower by basically removing a finger and going to a second finger. So for example, if we play with our ring finger at the 7th fret and pull off and end on the 5th fret, we've changed the pitch lower by removing that finger with our index finger rooted the whole time. And we can do it with any interval we can reach with our fingers. And while these are basically the opposite of a hammer-on, the technique's a little bit different. So again, we're going to go for a 2-fret interval from our ring finger to our index finger, as that's probably one of the most common that you'll use. We're going to strike the string with our ring finger at the 7th fret, and our index finger is going to be rooted at the 5th fret the entire time. And we're going to play, and we're going to remove our finger while holding the index finger. So we remove our ring finger while holding the index finger. But we're also going to kind of pluck the string with our ring finger as we're pulling off. So if you look closely, you can see that I'm plucking the string with my ring finger as I pull off. And that's going to give you a much more forceful sounding pull off as opposed to just going like this. The string dies very quickly if you just pull your finger off, but if you pluck it, it carries on. So in order to do this, we're going to have kind of that standard grip that we had last time. My thumb tends to be a little bit more around the neck when I do it, but some people like to do that more of the classical style guitar where your thumb's behind. Doesn't really matter that much for this technique. You just need that support, and you need to have that index finger kind of rooted there. And then we're going to play the note where our ring finger is fretted, and use that finger to kind of pull the string and pluck it gently back in a kind of a diagonal direction, while holding that index finger down the whole time. Now, one of the tricky things that happens with the pull-off is that you want to avoid kind of wildly hitting those other strings with your finger when you pluck. So the first thing you really need to do is to get a feel for how curved your finger needs to be. The more curved it's going to be and kind of angled, the less likely you are going to be to hit those other strings. But another thing that you can do is mute the higher string with the underside of your first finger. See, this is muted, so that it doesn't ring out when you pluck if you hit it by accident. And that'll prevent other strings from ringing out when you're doing that pull off if you hit them by accident. Another trick that I like to use is I'll sometimes like to mute the next lower string, so in this case it's the D string, with the tip of my index finger. Gives me a little bit wider range with this finger in case the tip of my pull off finger hits that D string as well. So again, what we want to do is we want to mute at least the next higher up string with the underside of our index finger. Keep that index finger rooted the entire time we're pulling off. We want to play the higher note, and we want to do that plucking motion. And again, we can do this in any combo. And the technique is the same. And so that's actually a good way to practice this technique, is to do like a similar technique that we did with the hammer-ons, and then practice going up each finger. So middle, ring, pinky, ring, middle. And so that's the basics for hammer-on pull-offs. It's really something you just have to practice. You need to find some songs from your favorite bands where they're doing like hammer-on pull-offs, and just try and learn those. And try to find songs where you're going to use your index finger, ring finger, and pinky finger to do those techniques as well. And so lastly, we can put those two techniques together and do the hammer-on pull-off. And so it's basically just alternating between those two techniques. And what we want to do again we want to do that plucking motion when we're doing the pull-off part. So the hammer-on is going to be the same. And then when we get to the pull-off part, we can use that plucking motion to make the hammer-on pull-off last all day. So that's it for this one. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe. That way you get notified when I post new content. I post new videos like this several times a week, and I'll see you guys next time.